a lot of work with the Sisters of St. Joseph, working with Judith Royer, who's my colleague in the theater department, collecting stories from different social service organizations in Los Angeles. But the one that I want to introduce LMU to right now is the story of an organization that I've really come to admire. It's called Jovenes, and it started, my introduction to it was housing for youth, homeless youth. The Director of Development is Eric Hubbard, who's right here. And just to give you a little bit about my introduction to it, I first was introduced to Jovenes when my husband was on the team of architects renovating the housing. I think it was 2013, maybe, around there?
Between 2010 and 2012, yeah.
2010 and 2012. And they were renovating housing for group housing. Eric will explain to you how the housing works, moving from shelter to group housing to independent living in a very natural and, I think, comfortable way. My reintroduction to Jovenes was going to an event in Mariachi Square for everyone in a real serious program to end homelessness. And there, the youth from Jovenes were telling their stories. So this fit into exactly the kind of work we're doing at LMU with Judith, which is storytelling, story collecting, and storytelling as an important means for healing, for really looking at turning your pain into something beyond personal, into something that can help other people. And it fits so well with our mission for Voices of Justice that I thought it would be interesting. I would like to find out more about Jovenes, and I'd like everybody here to know about it. So I think we should start with one of the stories. This is one of the youth at Jovenes, Chris's story, and we're going to show it up here.
I was scared, I was hurt, I was in a world of pain and loneliness. But at the end of the day, it just made me stronger. I became homeless. It all occurred when I was 17. I didn't like my mom's ex-husband, and he was very, very violent. So he would abuse my mom, and then I just got into partying, drinking, drugs, everything. She kicked me out. And being in LA, my whole family turned their back on me. Everybody just turned their back on me and was like, you're a disgrace to the family. While being homeless, not knowing where I was gonna be at next. Like, where am I gonna go? What am I gonna eat? I want my mom, but it's just like I didn't have my mom. I couldn't get to my mom. She didn't want to know anything. I would pray and pray and pray, and then till finally they sent an angel. Since I came here to Homelessness, my case manager, she started helping me. She was like, you know what? She was like, you need to be an advocate for yourself. She was like, I'm going to give you these tools. She was like, I'm not going to hold your hand. She's like, you're going to go on your own. It's just like they put a fire underneath me and was like, oh my gosh, they opened my eyes. Things I would have never thought before, like helping people and everything. Like, I was like, you know what? They've gone through the same thing as me. I'm going to help them out. Like, seeing how Homeless does it and helps people out, I was like, you know what? I'm going to pass that on. Now that I crashed and burned and everything like that, and I'm like resurfacing, I'm just like, you know what? I am who I am. I'm extra, I'm exaggerated. I love myself for who I am. My goal is to become a social worker in youth delinquency. For those kids that the society throws out, I'm just gonna make like all these people happy, give them a redemption in our life, a second like chance.
Now I would like Eric to share with us something about the history of Jovenes and their mission and what their plans are to move into the future. Because from what I know of Jovenes, it has grown tremendously into an institution that's really a part of East LA, Southeast LA, that I would like everybody to know about.
Thank you so much, Doris. Let me just pull this. All right, cool. And does this clicker work for? Okay, great. Chris is he's a really great one of our youth that we work with. He came to Jovenes a little bit over a year and a half ago. He had been, a lot of situations, especially with his family accepting him being coming out as gay, really created an unhealthy relationship within his family. He tried to go stay with his uncle for a little bit, but he was also in a headspace where he wanted to be very independent and do his own thing, and it really wasn't a situation where he felt like he was being supported. And so he spent some time on the streets until he was eventually referred over to Jovenes, and he came and stayed in our shelter for a little bit. Then he moved into what we call permanent supportive housing, which is a program for youth with more mental health challenges. But since we've been able to stably house Chris, he's really an integral part of our organization. He's always volunteering to help out. And one of the cool things that we've been really working on with him is family reconnection. It's about establishing and improving that relationship with his family. And so we had a Christmas party a couple weeks ago for Christmas, and we were all able to meet his mom and see the kind of reconciliation that's happening. And so it's really important to see, not just how do we house youth, but how do we make sure that we can focus on what their long-term needs are, and make sure that they have, all of the support they need from both us as a staff, the housing itself, and then also establishing more positive relationships with the people in their lives who can really be helpful. So I'm really excited to be here today, and I guess I'll have the chance to talk about us as an agency, some of our history, my role at the agency, and also some of the cool storytelling projects that we've done over time. It's always, really fun, and it can be very empowering for youth to tell their stories. And then as an agency itself, it's really important for us to share the stories of our youth, both to, highlight, what youth homelessness is, and to attract attention, to our agency, especially as far as helping us spread our mission and fundraise. There's something that I call ethical storytelling, or that is called ethical storytelling. It's making sure that youth are fully bought in with the process, and I'll explain that a little bit more. But whenever we do tell our youth stories like Chris, we want to make sure that they're cool with having their story being told, and that they're part of the process, and that at any point that they can choose, I don't want to do this anymore and take my story down. So we're lucky that we have amazing young people like Chris that are willing to share their stories, because it can help really show the impact and increase awareness for what homeless youth experience. So Jovenes means youth in Spanish, and we work with young adults between the ages of 18 to 25 years old. We were founded in pretty much 1989, so this year technically can mark our 30th anniversary, out of a garage in East Los Angeles by a priest named Father Richard Estrada. He was at the priest at Placita Church, which is on Olvera Street, right in the heart of downtown LA. In the late 80s and early 90s, what he saw was so many, young people were coming to LA from Central and Latin America, fleeing a lot of civil wars, violence, lack of opportunities, very similar situation to what we have now. But they didn't have a lot of connections or any connections in Los Angeles, and so they were showing up at the doorstep of a place that they thought would be welcoming, the church. And the church, La Placita kind of became the home for LA sanctuary movement, of using faith-based organizations and institutions as a safe haven for folks who don't have, legal status here, or who are fleeing very violent situations, just a safe place to be. A lot of these kids weren't eligible for other types of services in Los Angeles at the time because of they didn't have documentation. So Father Estrada said, his nature is just saying, we have to do something about this. He was a priest to Cesar Chavez and Doris Huerta during the farm workers movement. So he's always just he's just a tremendous advocate for social justice, and he still is to this day. So what he did was he just got a group of volunteers together and said, let's do something for these young people. And he created Jovenes pretty much out of his garage in East Los Angeles. It was just housing 4 young people at a time. having the basics of shelter, some food, and arts programming too, because he wanted to make sure that, he could tap into the network of volunteers that he had, both to connect the youth with other types of resources, from legal help to advocacy, but also tap into that nourishing experience that doing art can provide. And so from that time, growing in a shelter in just East LA, we've gone through a couple iterations of the agency. And so now, fast forward to pretty much 30 years later, we have our main headquarters in Boyle Heights, which is about a mile east of downtown, of Union Station, excuse me. And over the last few years, we've been able to grow to serve, I can almost see from here, but all of Southeast Los Angeles County. So we have our main headquarters in Boyle Heights. We have a satellite office in Norwalk, and now we're responsible for providing, services for youth throughout about a size territory about 1/8 of the county. So it's a big area that we're working in. We really want to make sure that we're leading as far as developing new housing opportunities for youth and showing how you can innovate within LA's homeless services, but also making sure that whatever we do, we're meeting the needs of the youth that we serve, and we're not trying to force youth into a situation or housing program or anything that's not the right fit for them. Working with young adults, it means that they have a choice. All of our youth have a choice about whether or not they want to be in the program, what they want to do with their time in the program, and it's up to us to make sure that we're providing them with a lot of different opportunities. But at the end of the day, it's about making sure that they have the right buy-in and choose to make to move their lives forward. It becomes a lot easier once you have a stable house, and that's what we know, that our youth are coming from so many different situations of abuse, abandonment, and neglect, coming from the foster care system, coming from probation. Some youth have more economic challenges. Just living here in Los Angeles is incredibly expensive. Other youth have more mental health challenges, and so understanding what the trauma of homelessness has been, the trauma of growing up in potentially in families that were also experiencing homelessness or severe poverty, going through different types of experiences in your lives and not having the type of support or treatment available to you. So we want to make sure that we're providing our youth with both the mental health counseling that they need and positive relationships from our case management and our staff. Let me see if we have. I'll just click here. Okay, so I'm going to skip talking about LA's coordinated entry system. I'll come back to that. But we, again, working with youth between the ages of 18 to 25 years old, providing a wide range of housing programs. Emergency shelter, which is a basic entrance point into our program. We have a 12-bed emergency shelter for young men. Transitional housing, which is that youth can stay there for up to 2 years. We want youth to only live there for about 8 months to a year, because we really believe in youth having their own place and not always living in programs. But it's also a rent-free program, and so we have one on our main site in Boyle Heights, and we also master lease. We rent out a couple apartments in Southeast LA where we place 4 youth in each of those apartments, and so that way we're able to have youth living with roommates, receiving the case management and supportive services that help, and having a safe place to live while we continue to work on their own employment plans and ultimately their permanent housing plans. And then we have different types of permanent housing. So when we say permanent, we don't mean necessarily that youth are going to live there forever. But they're going to live there. They have the rights of a tenant. They have relationships with their case managers, but there's not obligations on them to participate in a whole host of services, because we are teaching them that independence. Permanent supportive housing, which Doris' husband helped us design back in 2012 that we opened those. And then we work with local nonprofit housing developers to create units for transition age youth in new buildings that are being opened up for affordable housing. And then rapid rehousing, which is a rental subsidy program that allows youth to, we help a youth move into their own apartment, a market rate apartment. We pay for their rent for the first 3 months, and then generally speaking, the youth are able to pick up 10% of the rent every month after that, until they're taking on the full cost of their lease. Any questions so far? Yes.
So you say they're picking up 10% of the rent. Is that like increasing each time?
Yeah, so like month 4, they could pay 10% of it. Month 5, they could pay 20%. And it's always in conversation with us about, we looking at how is their employment going? Are they saving money? If they have challenges and say, hey, I'm going to be short on the rent this month. It's about creating that kind of communication. So that also helps them prepare to be advocates for themselves when they have to go and just talk to their landlord, right? But the goal is to make sure that, and it doesn't always work like that for every youth. It's about understanding what the youth's financial situation is and how much they can do, and making sure that there's a plan in place to make sure that the youth will become self-sufficient over time. So it could take 3 months for a youth to say, okay, that was all I needed. Now I can take on the full cost of the lease and myself and I'm good. Other youth, it might take a year and a half. So it's about understanding what those types of needs are, how we can best fit in and make that happen, and also, creating that opportunity for youth to develop life skills and improve communication, and just generally trust that we have their back, so it's not like, hey, I'm gonna miss my rent and now I'm gonna be out on the street. It's like, we're housing first, we're making sure that youth can stay housed, and that they're in a position to succeed over the long term. Any other questions so far? Before I forgot to really introduce myself. I've been at Jovenes, Monday was my 11th year on the job. And so this was my first real job I went to Occidental College. I'm from just outside Chicago, so I'm glad I'm not home this week in Chicago. It's raining here, but it's negative 20 degrees there, so this is a little bit better. And so I was 23 years old when I started working at Jovenes, and I never had that kind of experience of being homeless at all. I've always had a family that's taken care of me, that still is here for me even today. I started working there as a grant writer and learning about fundraising. I never written a grant before I started working there either, so I don't know exactly why they hired me. But it was a really great entrance point for me just out of college, where I got to say I like to write, I like to communicate. So let me learn how to do grant writing and that kind of stuff. I thought I was just going to be doing some part-time filing work, but it turned out I was responsible for all of their fundraising. So I just had to learn on the job, just dig in. We had a staff of about 6 people back then, and we're housing 20 youth at a time. And then today we have a staff approaching 40 people, and we almost have the capacity to house about 200 youth at a time. So it's been a lot of growth over 11 years has gone by pretty quickly, and it's been really exciting to be able to be part of something that's, I was always amazed by the resiliency of our young people, knowing that I had family support, but they didn't have family support. Knowing that we've had very different types of experiences, but there's a lot of stuff that we have in common. Like when I started working there, a lot of the guys, we were just talking about basketball and music and stuff like that. We all like the same stuff, and so it was just understanding that we can have very different experiences in life, but there's still so much in common, and there's ways that we can, I can pitch in to help them out, and they're pitching in to help me accomplish the goals of the job as far as telling their stories and expanding what people understand about Homelessness so that we can continue to grow and serve even more and more youth. So it's been really exciting over those times to be able to be part of something that continues to grow. Leo's another one of our amazing youth. I never caught him on video yet, but I always ask him to come and speak at different events and things like that. When he was 18, he had one more semester left in high school. And he's grown up in pretty much the Pico Union area of Los Angeles. He was living with his grandmother and more extended family. Their landlord came up to them and said, hey, there's way too many people living in this apartment. Someone has to go, or otherwise all of you guys have to go. And so he had just turned 18, and he was like, well, I don't want my grandmother to be kicked out of her apartment, so I guess I'll go. And so he was trying to finish high school. He had all of his stuff in his backpack, and he would bike. And his bike, and so he was staying at different bigger shelters kind of in the downtown area in South LA, and biking all the way to downtown to go to high school. And eventually his counselor started noticing that there was just something up. He wasn't the same. He didn't have the same type of energy that he usually had. And she asked him what was going on, and he told her what was happening, and so she referred him to Jovenes. And so when he moved to Jovenes in our emergency shelter, he was able to, first, the things he always told me, I was just super excited that I didn't have to have everything in my backpack every day. I had a safe place where I could leave my my books, my clothes, and I could park my bike at night. I didn't have to worry about being back at the agency by 6 p.m. or 5 p.m. to be first in line in order to get housing, because the way that we work is it's not a first come first serve every night. Once you're in the program, you're in the program as long as you're following the rules and working on your stuff. And so he knew that he had that safe place that he could really focus, on high school, finishing high school and graduating, and also start planning for what he wanted to accomplish. And so Leo he's one of the guys, he just came, like when I started talking to him, I was like, so what do you want to do? He's like, oh, I'm going to be an architect. I was like, that's cool. Maybe we
Get him an internship.
Yeah, he already has one. So that.
Oh, well, get him a job.
Yeah. So he's like, this is my plan. I'm going to go to East LA College, and then I'm going to transfer to Cal Poly Pomona because they have a really good architecture program. And this is another example of where storytelling can be super helpful. Like one time, a reporter for KCRW, the radio station, reached out and said, hey, we want to do a story on Jovenes and, working with homeless youth. And so I had her interview Leo, and he said in the story, he's like, I want to be an architect. And then the next day after it aired, I got all these calls from architects saying, hey, how can we help Leo? So he kind of, we were able to surround him with kind of these mentors in architecture, who eventually got him a paid internship at a major firm downtown LA. So he's studying at ELAC, East LA College right now. He has his paid gig as an architect, which is really rare apparently for them to bring in a community college student, but he's just super bright. And so now I have no doubt that he's gonna eventually transfer to Cal Poly Pomona and continue to study and stuff, and then maybe one day I told him he'll design a building for us. And so, Leo is just another example of, he was going through a lot of tough times. But the stability that our housing was able to provide to him allowed him to focus on what mattered, not having to focus on where he's going to sleep or what he's going to eat. He could really focus on what he wanted to accomplish. He put his mind to it. Now he's living independently on his own, and we still stay in touch just to make sure that he has all the support that he needs. And so in the last year, in the last year we housed about 183 youth throughout all of our programs, and 85% of them increased their housing stability by either moving to transitional housing or into permanent housing and having the ability to maintain that permanent housing. So it really goes to show that having all these different housing options allows us to work with youth in the way that best fits their needs, and our goal is to really make sure that they're becoming more stable, so we don't have a rotating system of youth going in and out of shelters. We want to put an end to that. All right. Over the last few years, one thing that we've been focusing in on is what's happening on our community college campuses. The reason behind this is as we started growing through permanent housing and working with youth for a couple years at a time, we didn't want them just to focus on minimum wage entry-level jobs. We wanted them to start understanding that they had opportunities to go back to school. A lot of times our youth didn't have very positive experiences in school when they were growing up, so we wanted to say, well, community colleges can be a really great entrance point for you to get back into the game. And because there's so many of them, it's very accessible, and you can experience different types of opportunities in community colleges. And so when we just started approaching schools asking us, or asking them if we could just go on campus or tours and things like that, counselors and guidance counselors and financial aid officers started asking us if we could house their students who are experiencing homelessness. So that's when we started learning about student homelessness, where in LA, 1 in 5 community college students experiences homelessness. Nationwide, that number is about 14%, so it's a huge challenge for young people your age going to schools throughout here in Los Angeles who still might be sleeping in their cars or couch surfing. Half of students experience housing instability, so that means they don't think that it's going to be a stable place for them to live. They may be staying at a friend's couch or things like that, or they know that it's not sustainable. Eventually they're not going to be able to make rent, especially if they want to continue focusing on school rather than trying to work full-time. And this prevents a lot of young people from graduating. In California, about half of all former foster youth will go to a community college, but anywhere between just 2 to 11% actually graduate from community college. So it's a huge, and a lot of times it's because of things like housing instability or homelessness or hunger, things that are getting in the way of actually focusing on school. So we decided that we had to be able to do something about this and started thinking about, looking at the true cost of what a student is paying for education. In this case, this is one of the youth that we're working with. His financial award letter calculated his living expenses to be $19,121 for tuition and books, room and board, and personal expenses. And remember, there's no dorms at community college, so it's not even like on-campus housing is an option. His financial aid package between Pell Grants, a work study, and a fee waiver came out to almost $12,000. But that meant that he had an unmet need of $7,100. And that, was really cost of housing. It's a cost of everything that's happening off campus. And so that's one reason why this young person was experiencing homelessness. He didn't have family that he could count on to go stay with or to help him with his housing costs. And so he was connected to us. We were able to put him into rapid rehousing, permanent housing program, and eventually was able to finish East LA College and transfer to, I think he went up to Oregon, University of Oregon. So it was a great example of a young person that was with us for a little bit of time, and then he went on to a better, to further his educational goals. So, those types of early experiences led us to think about, what do we do for this population? We know what it's like for youth coming to us from the street, coming to us out of probation, undocumented youth. So this was kind of a new population that we were starting to work with, was youth who were already enrolled in college, who knew what they wanted to do, and needed that kind of housing support to help them accomplish those goals. And so we created this program that we call our College Success Initiative, and using a strategy we're calling College Focused Rapid Rehousing. And so rapid rehousing is the rental subsidy program that I was talking about, where we help a youth move into their own apartments. With our college students, what we try and do is, instead of having them pay more and more of the rent over time, it's more about having a stable type of rental subsidy from us. They can kick in a little bit of it, but we try and time that rental subsidy towards the time that they're in college. So if you have 2 years left in school, we're trying to support you throughout those 2 years so that you're not worried about making the rent at the end of the month, but you can really focus on going to school. If you have one more semester, that's great, and we're really there to support you through those semesters. And then once they're graduating, it's about working with them on a transition plan. Hopefully they can go to a 4-year college where they can also access on-campus housing, but also at the same time, for youth who are graduating, they're able to get better paying jobs, move into more stable housing options as well. And so what we're doing is we're partnering with local community colleges in our area, East LA College, Rio Hondo College, and Cerritos College, and we're placing one of our staff on campus. And I'll explain a little bit about who those staff are, because it's really exciting. And then we're using the rapid rehousing or other type of housing models that we have to move them into a stable place to live, providing them with the case management, which is really just about how are things going, making sure they're accessing all the resources, benefits that they're eligible for, having someone in their life that they can trust, also job, employment counseling, job placement, and just emotional support. And then academic case management is helping them navigate all the resources that are available, both on campus so that they can access the tutoring that they might need, learn how to advocate for yourself when you have to do financial aid, and just best practices of go and introduce yourself to your professor at the beginning of the semester. I mean, I didn't do that enough when I was in college, but I know it would have been super helpful if I had done that, and go to office hours and all those kind of things. A lot of youth don't have people in their lives that are telling them these things. School counselors are overwhelmed, and so we want to make sure that we're able to provide a little bit of extra support to them. Our peer navigators that we have on campus are young people with lived experience of homelessness, who have gone through our program, are stably housed, and want to give back. And so what they are there are access points on campus, and so they each spend about 20 hours a week on usually in the financial aid office or the EOPS office, which is just extra services for students who need support. They receive referrals from all over the campus, anyone from the security guard to professors to financial aid to the health services offices can refer a young person who's experiencing homelessness to meet with our staff. And a lot of times students have a stigma about being homeless. I think we think it's super helpful for them to meet someone who's been in their shoes, who's come out on the other side and is able to explain the process, rather than sending them to our shelter or other programs that they might not feel like, I don't want to go stay in a shelter. I'd rather I'm okay in my car, I can make it. but we want to make sure that we can fight kind of those stigmas, and having Brianna, Sari, and Celestine as our peer navigators really helps welcome youth into the program, understand what their needs are, and develop better relationships throughout the colleges. And so, our goals for this program are to really help our students achieve, their AA degree, transfer to a 4-year college, obtain a professional certification, because we know the power of education. Community college grads can earn over $400,000 more over their lifetime than someone with just a high school degree. So we really want to make sure that we're able to help our youth accomplish that educational goal in a reasonable amount of time, rather than spending 6 years on a community college campus. Try and do it in the 2 to 3 years that it can take, and understand how do we continue to support them in those endeavors. Let me just finish up, and then we'll show Kishana's story. And so, since we've started launching this program a couple years ago, we've housed about 50 students. We've already seen about a quarter of them graduate or transfer to a 4-year college, and we're seeing amazing success stories and amazing examples of what housing provides. That we try and celebrate student successes. This is what Bella said. She said, before Jovenes, my life was a mess and school was hard. Jovenes helped me straighten out my life. Their support was the best thing that happened to me. My degree and success is partly due to Jovenes. I'm grateful. I think we played a little bit of a role, but it's her resilience that got her, to overcome the experience of being homelessness and move on with her life. And we're super proud of Bella and all the youth that we're serving. These are the buildings that Doris' husband helped us redevelop. This is where my office is in Boyle Heights. So this is our main campus. We have a really small park right in the middle of the campus that we want to turn into a dorm for homeless students. And this is another housing project that we are looking to develop, or that we should be breaking ground on. 8 units of housing for youth with mental health challenges, and also homeless community college students. And so we're always trying to explore new ways of connecting youth with housing, and ways that we can use housing as a tool to help youth accomplish whatever goal it is that they have, and then move on to a more sustainable, healthier to life, so that they can really leave homelessness behind. That's just a little bit of what we do. Should we show Kishana's story?
Let's show Kishana's, and then we'll talk a little bit.
I go by this slogan, I have to survive it so I can tell it. My name is Kishana Johnson. I'm 22 years old, and I currently attend Citrus College. I was raised in the foster care system. It's not much support. They put you in a place, but then after you're done out of it, there's no, hey, here's another path that you can go down. You're left to the street. And so I felt abandoned. I felt broken. I felt lost. I was living from house to house. And eventually I started living out of my car. It's embarrassing, living out of your car going to school. I didn't have anywhere to study. I couldn't really focus. My emotions was all over the place. I didn't know if someone was gonna rob me. I found Jovenes College Success Initiative through a counselor at my school. I let my counselors know that my grades are dropping tremendously because I'm living out of my car and I have no place to go. Jovenes is helping me by paying my rent, by meeting with me weekly to assure that I'm saving money, to assure that I'm emotionally stable, that I have a plan, and that I have goals and aspirations, and that I have a deadline to reach those goals. Making sure that I don't go backwards, but I go forward. Every day I think, I'm not gonna let this program down. Andrea is my case manager. She's kind, she's nice, she's really encouraging. You're gonna make it, Kishana. That's her quote. You got this, Kishana. Do well in school. She's always encouraging, and that's always important because you always need it. Because it damaged me when I was in my car. It wasn't easy, And then my mentality was going down. The program has helped me step over, depression, step over hurt, step over, doubt. So just having a home gave me all that back, all my hope, my sense of self. It showed me that I'm not forgotten about. While I was homeless, my grades were failing, and when I got into a house, my grades shot up to all A's. I'm more hopeful now that people still care. So after a year and a half living in my car and finally get my key to my house and having my own room and own bed, I'm grateful. At the end of the day, helping make somebody else's life become better. That's what's so great about this program.
Wow. Eric, thank you. That's really great. And I would like to, yeah. Thank you. I think just for a little while, I'd like to ask a few questions. How many of you had heard about Jovenes before this presentation? Oh, good. Okay. Now you do. And I was going to ask Eric, how do people get referred to you?
Yeah, so we are, the slides that's actually skipped over. So we receive referrals from all sorts of different places, from hospitals to schools to churches to word of mouth. Our youth are a lot of times our best ambassadors for us, and because they're oftentimes connected to other young people who are still in the streets. And so, you know, what we are part of is LA's coordinated entry system. Has anyone heard of that? You just saw it was, I just ran into the executive director of LA Homeless Service Authority. He was here right before me. And so what they're doing is they're creating a system, and we've created a system in Los Angeles where, you know, to streamline the kind of social services and placements into housing, so that regardless of where you are, there's a local person that you can talk to, a local agency that's in charge of establishing housing resources and support. So we're the leaders in Southeast Los Angeles for that, and we serve you throughout those types of communities. So that allows us to coordinate with different housing providers. So if a young person goes to more of an adult program, they can make the referral to Jovenes. If they go to a church, you know, we have relationships with the different faith-based organizations so that they know who to call to refer young people to us. And then our staff, our peer navigators, are part of that coordinated entry system. So that way we can assess youth for their challenges and needs, and determine if one of our housing programs is the right fit, or if we have another partner that provides more of a specialized housing program that some of these youth could access.
Good. Well, I think we need to know about that. And my other question was, how much follow-up counseling stuff outside of housing and as people go through college and get out in the world, do you stay in, is there
we try to.
that people stay in touch?
Yeah, we try and stay in touch with them as much as we can. You know, it's challenging because it takes staff capacity to be able to do that. We're working on doing more surveys and following up with youth. We do maintain a relationship at a minimum of 6 months after they exit our program, and we're always trying to figure out how do we kind of increase that. We do maintain a lot of relationships with youth and clients who were with us years ago and then may contact us and say, hey, I'm doing a lot better now, thank you so much, is there any way I can help? So sometimes youth can come back and be mentors to other young people.
That's right.
One of our guys, Angelo, he just started doing a Dress for Success workshop, and so he works with his colleagues to collect a lot of professional clothes, and he comes back into the shelter and teaches the guys how to, this is how you tie a tie, this is what you wear for your interview, don't forget to iron your shirt or use the spray to get the wrinkles out before your interview. So it's like those types of relationships are really important for us to maintain.
That's one of the things I like so much about Jovenes. Actually, Eric's story proves to me what a natural agency it is, that I like the idea that a 23-year-old could start working, filing, and then very naturally become one of the leaders of the organization. And I think that's the kind of feeling I get from Jovenes that is on a human level something that gives me hope about what to do about the problems that we have now. We talk about action. The last part of this symposium is about action, and I feel like Jovenes is a really great, very natural, organic picture of action, starting with one shelter and now being this institution that people know about, that has expanded its goals as much as they have. So that's something I like a lot. Are there other questions you guys have? Yeah, Judith.
I have a question. When you, we have a lot of support for our students to do internships, etc. Do you have students from the four-year colleges? Are there opportunities for them to do internships with Jovenes?
Yeah. Yeah, there's...
In other words, what's available that our people could do?
I believe we have an internship application on our website. We don't have a lot of interns all the time. It's more about based off of what our programs need, if they have a need for, especially a young intern in social work who's learning social work, who can help support the case management staff. Sometimes I'll need an intern for my department in development, doing grant writing, fundraising, communications work. And so on the contact us of our website, there's a form for any potential intern to fill out saying what they're interested in doing.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Sylvia Zamora. I'm a professor of sociology. I brought my class here, so shout out to you guys. It's a first year seminar called Latino LA. I want to applaud you for the work that you're doing. I was in the panel right before this one where we saw, we heard from researchers at UC Irvine and got all this really informative data about the causes of homelessness in LA, and they said that one of the root causes was housing affordability, or the lack of housing affordability. So I know it's an uphill battle, especially in a place like LA, where it's so expensive to live. I am from Southeast LA. I was born and raised in Southgate, and I was hoping that maybe you can just share a little bit for the students about some of the broader structural causes of homelessness among youth to begin with.
Yeah.
And especially, and maybe you can share a little bit about Southeast LA, the fact that it is a predominantly Latino community. There's a large population of immigrants, low-income, working-class populations. So what are some of the unique challenges that young Latino people face, and then immigrants, specifically the undocumented youth?
Yeah. I always say that we talk a lot about ending homelessness, and I'm like, well, we're not going to end homelessness until we end poverty, right? And so that's the root cause of a lot of what we're experiencing and what we're trying to fix, is knowing that we have a very unequal society, where a lot of people don't have the opportunities. There's a lot of structural issues behind that. There's structural racism, it's classism, it's issues with immigration. All of those things add up. The school systems, interactions with the police and over-policing, all of those things, can contribute to why youth experience homelessness. About 40% of the young people that we work with are coming from either the foster care system or the criminal justice system, or have experience in both systems. And so, knowing that youth are encountering these types of systems at such an early age, a lot of times youth who are getting either released from juvenile detention or jail, or from the foster care system, are just released with no resources and no direction about where to go. Sometimes they're just giving a paper, maybe, that has our phone number on it and say, call this number. But it's not like an actual plan that's being put in place to say, hey, when you're getting out of juvenile detention or jail, what are you going to do? You might go back into the same neighborhood and get in trouble again, or, you try and get away from that, but then you don't have any kind of support in any other parts of the city. So those are some of the some of the reasons why youth become homeless, and the other thing is just it's so expensive to live here in Los Angeles. The sheer cost of housing, of affording a 1-bedroom apartment that's going for $1,200 a month for a young person that doesn't have family support, or barely has a minimum wage job, is really difficult. And so, LA faces such a huge housing shortage. We have something like 2% vacancy rates, and a rising cost of housing across the board. It makes it very difficult for unsupported young people to make it on their own. I know when I graduated from college, I lived with roommates, and it seemed like a natural thing to do, but a lot of young people, it's just hard to even talk to a landlord and say, hey, I don't have, a great credit history, or I don't have, X and Y, Z years of employment behind my belt. And so the landlord's like, well, there's more qualified applicants. I'm going to rent it to the higher income person. And so, that's where we have to step in and also advocate for the youth and create relationships with landlords like that. About 65% of the youth that we currently serve are Latino, and it's been interesting in the 11 years that I've been there. When I started, it felt like 90% were pretty much the immigrant youth that we were working with. As we've grown as an agency, and as law enforcement and immigration enforcement has shifted over time, that population has decreased, and it's not just in the last 2 years since Trump became in office. It's been happening for more than almost a decade. And so all those kind of shifts, we're receiving more referrals from all across the county now. And there is a shift in enforcement and immigration. So we don't have the same number of undocumented youth that we used to have, although we are one of the few agencies that still does serve them, and it come with its own challenges of knowing that their employment opportunities are going to be super limited. Their ability to use all the other public resources are super limited, so we have to figure out different ways of making it work for them. But then, the majority of the youth that we're serving are also just born and raised here in Los Angeles, who grew up in communities like Southgate or Montebello, Norwalk, South LA, throughout South LA, Boyle Heights, East LA, Highland Park, Eagle Rock, all over, who, families are just on the verge, and you turn 18, the goal is always to make it on your own. And knowing that all of those types of things, plus the lack of housing opportunities, situations like trying to go to community college but not having a safe place to be, all of those things are some of the reasons why youth are pushed into homelessness. What we have to make sure that we do is provide culturally competent services. Most of our staff is fully bilingual. I'm one of the few people who's not. And make sure that, we have also very young staff. Our case management staff is typically, in mid 20s to early 30s, because it's also a great entrance level job into social services, but also because the youth can really relate to what the staff, are able to tell them. And just understanding how do we create an approach that works for each location that we're at. So trying to develop more relationships with the independent cities throughout Southeast LA, with the local governments, to say how can you step up to provide more support for young people living in your community, not only focusing on resources that are coming from the bigger city of Los Angeles or the county itself, but for these local communities to also step up and say, we know we have a homeless problem. We may have more conservative people, not people who say not in my backyard, who are against housing, creating more housing because they think for some reason that building housing creates more homelessness or pushes more homeless people into their neighborhoods. It's like, no, it's about addressing the needs that you already have and being honest about that. And so we're trying to develop relationships with a lot of local city councils and local mayors to see what can they do to create more resources for youth.
Thanks. Other questions?
I don't have a question, but the sister who founded our foundation for the Daughters of Charity was a nurse, but she said several times that the only way to get out of poverty was education. And I am very impressed with what you do to help kids who were homeless but now have a home, but also you provide them with the tools they need to stay, to support themselves, because they aren't going to be able to do it if they don't have an education.
Yeah.
And you really seem to, you really press that and make it an issue, and they need to, and most people wouldn't think about it, but it's very important that you do that.
Yeah, most people are really stunned when they hear about how many students experience homelessness. They're like, oh, they're college students, they must be fine, you know?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And that's clearly not, even in the California state CSU system, about 1 in 10 students experience homelessness. So it's not. Huh?
Yeah.
Even at LMU, I'm sure.
Yeah, even hunger has been one of
Yeah,
the
yeah.
places we've seen it.
Food insecurity.
Yeah. And so it is education, it is employment, it's all these things. But it's also, having, it's more than education, right? It's about relationships, it's about self-confidence, it's about knowing that you have worth, and those are things that can help you succeed in school and outside of school, and having people in their life that are reinforcing that notion is part of the equation as well. So we have to look at holistically about what youth need and how do we either provide it ourselves or work with other folks and partners to be able to provide that.
Comments? Yeah?
So I have a question about the resources that you get, especially thinking about local, state, and federal government support. I know you say you're a grant writer and you were in charge of fundraising.
Yep.
Can you talk a little bit about the support that you do get from government at any level?
Yeah.
And also maybe even some backlash, given that some of the crisis is actually coming from improvements in communities that require or that have the consequences of them are gentrification, right? And so I'm thinking about Dr. Samara, I'm from Inglewood, right? And changes that are going on in Inglewood because of the decisions of local government, actually provide a larger pool for programs like yourself. So then how do you navigate kind of the resources and the support from the government agencies so that it's not just, grant writing and fundraising from the community? How do you guys negotiate those things?
Yeah, so great question. In Los Angeles, a couple years ago, we passed an initiative called Measure H. Has anyone else heard of that before? It's a sales tax throughout the entire county because we realized we had a crisis. Finally, we realized we had a crisis with over 50,000 homeless individuals on our streets on any given night. That's what we're finding in the homeless count. And so knowing that we have a housing shortage, regardless of and wanted to do something like coordinated entry system where all these agencies were going to be talking to each other and to increase support for homeless families, youth, and individuals, Measure H is really helping ramp up a lot of programs. And so that's how over the last 2 years we've pretty much doubled our size because of increased funding that's coming in through Measure H. And so about 70 to 75% of our funding is coming from the county and the city of Los Angeles, who are working together through Measure H and the coordinated entry system. And so I think it's a great, and I heard a couple weeks ago the county CEO, who kind of like manages all the county programming, said that LA collectively has housed over 20,000 people permanently in the last couple years. But we still have, in San Francisco, that would have ended homelessness almost 3 times over. Wow. So it just goes to show the need that we have and the size of our homeless population, and that makes it a huge challenge. But I think it is an example of local government really stepping up to say, we know that there's a problem. We have to take it to the people to get the vote, and over 2/3 of LA County voters approved paying a little bit more to help alleviate homelessness. Now it's up to us also to demonstrate what the successes are of that, of youth like Chris and Kishana who are receiving support because of Measure H and other local streams. My agency, luckily, I used to apply for a lot more federal grants, and then I kind of gave up a couple years ago. But we don't receive a lot of federal funding, or we're not relying on federal funding, and so that's why we're lucky to be here in Los Angeles, knowing that there is all this focus on homelessness and that does provide opportunities. and understanding what the right types of strategies are. So we're grateful that LHSA, the LA Homeless Service Authority, really is looking at what works and funding what's working, rather than prescribing here's the only way to go ahead and do it, but funding like a whole bunch of different interventions, because we all realize that there's not one single pathway out of homelessness for anybody. It could be a rental subsidy, it could be family reconnection, it could be just, hey, I'm about to get evicted, I need some support. So we're able to provide that kind of support to young people now. So it's understanding the root, what's forcing people into homelessness and how to get them out, and there's not just one way to do it. Regarding gentrification, it's a big issue. We're in Boyle Heights. It's always like kind of a ground zero of gentrification debates. When things like the Gold Line came in and connected Boyle Heights more with downtown LA, you know, it is a big challenge. And luckily in Boyle Heights, there's always that community pushback. You know, Boyle Heights is just kind of a center for community organizing and activism, but other communities don't have that. Like, I'm thinking like Highland Park, you know, since I used to go to Occidental College, like it's completely changed in the last 15 years. And Inglewood's is facing the same types of challenges, right? So it's a negotiation, because you do want increased resources and nicer things in your community, but you don't want that to come at the cost of displacing the people that have lived there forever. And so, you know, one thing that that's why it's important for us to look at when new housing is being proposed, you know, is it affordable housing? You know, because that's what we really advocate for, is instead of building a big high-rise in Boyle Heights, you know, build more affordable housing for local community residents. And how do we partner together with those affordable housing developers to make sure some of those units are dedicated to youth? And so those are some of the strategies that we're trying to do, but it's an ongoing conversation. You have to be able to have those kind of conversations and figure out what the best path forward is for a community, because it can't only be development, and it can't only be leaving things the way that it is. You know, things are going to change over time, so you have to find, you know, a good dialogue to make sure that is a sustainable change that helps people living there and also brings in new opportunities to the neighborhoods. Yes.
Do you guys partner or like work with other programs like in the Los Angeles area for homeless youth?
Mm-hmm.
I know I've seen like other places like in Venice, for example, but do you guys like work with them, or are you just more focused like in the Boyle Heights area?
Yeah, I mean, you can only do this by working with other folks. So you probably, if it's in Venice, it's probably a safe place for youth. It's a great organization. SPY. I'm currently the co-chair of the LA Coalition to End Youth Homelessness, and Allison Hurst, the executive director of SPY, is the other co-chair. So we're working on, you know, how do we create citywide or countywide advocacy efforts, storytelling efforts. You know, how do we present a united face to what youth are experiencing and make sure that all of our agency voices can be heard together? Because we usually do have the same ideas about what's going to work and what's not going to work. And advocate for a decent slice of the pie as far as the funding that's coming, because we know that, you know, there has to be a lot of money for chronically homeless individuals who are the ones that are living in the encampments, for families who are experiencing homelessness, but we don't want to forget about the youth too. So it's about how do we divide all those things up, and one agency is not going to be able to do it. Making referrals between all these agencies is super important. So for us to work with providers in Hollywood, they can send youth our way, we can send youth their way, and understanding how to have good lines of communication. And for me as a grant writer, it's always been interesting. Like, I don't feel like I'm competing necessarily with them. I think there's actually, like, working with a few of them. We just applied last year to expand our transitional housing program and launch another program called Host Homes. And Host Homes are where, like, someone who has an extra bedroom in their house can bring in a youth to stay in that. So SPY was actually running that program as a pilot, and so I was leaning on them for, hey, how does this work for you guys? And they were applying at the same time to open transitional housing, which we've been doing forever, and so I was able to provide them with information about how it works for us. And so instead of competing with each other for limited resources, we felt it was better to just lean on each other, and we both got the resources that we needed to expand our programs.
Wow. How does the host housing work? Has that been working? Have you been using that at all?
We're about to start. So
Oh, yeah?
we just got approved like a few weeks ago.
Yeah?
And so now we have to start hiring some people and start recruiting hosts. But it's going to be really interesting. The idea is that if, for example, like if someone's kid, if one of your parents lived in Southeast LA and you went off to college and they're like, well, we're not going to save your bedroom anymore, but we're going to welcome a young person to live there for 6 months, while they get on their feet and get connected to longer term support. That's kind of the idea behind a host home. Anyone that has an extra bedroom, we do a screening, we do a matching between the host and the youth to make sure that it's a good fit. And then place a young person into that program, into their home, knowing that it's a temporary situation. While the rest of our, it's typically taken about 90 days to place a youth into permanent housing using the rental subsidy. And so what happens during that 90 days? We don't want the youth to continue sleeping in the car or on the streets, but having something like this could be really great, especially for the community college students, to have a safe place to be while they're connected to longer term support.
Great. I just like hearing so many possibilities for ways to deal with this that are just seem to make sense. You have an extra bedroom. Come on. Other questions? Comments?
Last semester I volunteered in, I don't know if you know the Francisco Homes, and they deal with issues of like criminal justice, and they work with prisoners that have been released that served like 34 years, and a big issue that they have to deal with is like recidivism, for example. And you guys work with youth that have been through the criminal justice system. How have you seen the topic of recidivism? Like, what has been like your experience with that concept?
I mean, it's a big risk. Recidivism means, getting arrested and going back to jail. Or it can also mean like becoming housed and then going back into homelessness. So it's about understanding creating opportunities for youth, employment. Homeboy Industries has a quote, "Nothing stops a bullet like a job." And so how do we connect our youth with real good employment opportunities that help them make money, stay out of trouble, and feel like they have a purpose? Understanding the case management, having those positive relationships, making sure that we understand where we're placing youth. If we're getting youth that's coming out of jail, we don't want to place them back, around the block from where they got arrested the first time. So we want to see, like, how do we put a youth into a new community where they can kind of restart their lives. And all those types of things are, unfortunately, it's not like they're learning a lot while they're in detention, so it's also about understanding what life skills, basic needs that we need to go over with the youth through the case management and support services plan. But our idea is that by providing the right type of individualized support, we're able to prevent things like recidivism because the youth is actually having their individual needs met. A lot of times why a youth might go back and do stuff is because they don't feel like they're having their needs met, and so they don't see any other options for themselves, or they fall back into the old habits. But it's about establishing a new opportunity for them so that they understand that they have, they can go a different direction, and that makes a big difference.
I think one of the things that makes you successful is you focused on housing and education. What happens with, do you have connection with clinics for medical issues that work with you that you can refer them to?
Yeah. So one of our programs is located at a few years ago, the LA County kind of renovated part of the old General Hospital building. It's, right by the USC medical campus in the LA County General Hospital. So, and they put 14 nonprofits in this first floor space called the Wellness Center. And it's a one-stop shop to connect community residents with the health care, from prevention to access to health insurance, a lot of advocacy around that, daycare, things like that. And so we were one of the original agencies that's there, and we are still there. And so that's one way that we can connect with the local clinics, making sure that our youth are enrolled for Medi-Cal or Medi-Cal a lot of times, and other public health resources, Mental health counseling as well, So a lot of the stuff that we're able to do, like, we're not a clinic, but we know clinics. We don't have on our staff like someone, we partner with Department of Mental Health to provide a lot of counseling to the youth. And so it's understanding what can we bring internally and what, as a fundraiser, like some of those things are really expensive. So why would I focus on fundraising for something when we can easily partner with another agency or organization who has those resources? And we can focus on expanding the housing resources that we know how to do.
Just a really quick question. Do you have a sense of the demographics of the people who are homeless in Los Angeles, like predominantly Black, Latino, Asian, and white?
Yeah, it's overwhelmingly people of color, Black and Latino individuals. We're doing the homeless count right now, and so every year that kind of updates what our numbers are, but it's, I know that African Americans are completely overrepresented in the homeless population, making up something like 13% of the entire county, but way more than that out of our homeless individuals. And then second group would be Latinos, and then slowly then after that. So that goes back to why is that systemic issues that are existing. Yeah.
Well, I think we've done it. I think, I really thank you for coming to this today. This is, it's encouraging to see so many people learning, and I really, really want to thank Eric.